These are all nonstick pans, and the greatest trick that the cookware industry ever pulled was convincing people that they were the default. Let's talk about it. First, an exhaustive list of the benefits of nonstick pans. They're easy to clean, they can be pretty cheap, and they're made of aluminum, which means they're lightweight and they heat up quickly. End of list. Now let's talk about the negatives. Nonstick pans are categorically the most fragile pans in most home kitchens, usually lasting only a year or two before they lose their nonstick properties and thus require replacement. And on that note, nonstick pan production is in a pretty ecologically terrible field, uniquely awful for the planet. And because you have to replace them so frequently, compared to say stainless steel, carbon steel, cast iron, all that stuff, we're doing a lot of damage by buying them. And after all that, they have the gall to be the only pan in most kitchens that will emit poison if you heat it up too much, and probably if you scratch it. So with all that in mind, I think we can agree that we should be pretty fucking specific about what we choose to use them for, yeah? Glad we're on the same page. Now let's talk about what makes a pan non-stick. There are two types of mainstream non-stick surfaces on the market today: ceramic and PTFE. Ceramic coatings are the latest trend, and the material is absolutely fascinating. It's essentially a sprayed-on glaze made of silicone, not to be confused with silicone, that forms a self-sacrificing surface. So when you cook something in the pan, the silicone, which is biologically inert and completely safe for human consumption, comes off, releasing your food from the pan. That's a super cool trick in my opinion, but it also explains why they lose performance so quickly, usually in under a year. They're literally removing their own surface as you cook with them. And as far as we know, these ceramic pans are less toxic than their PTFE counterparts. But there's an asterisk. The manufacturing process generally depends on a class of toxic gases called silanes to bond the silicon to the metal substrate. Silanes do have a tendency to neutralize themselves, which means it's almost certainly a non-issue. But it's a convenient example of how the process isn't quite as natural and healthy as manufacturers like to imply. There's a common refrain in the market, potentially driven by PTFE manufacturers, that we actually don't have enough data on these sol gel silicon surfaces to confirm whether or not they are actually non-toxic. But in fact, we've been using silicon sol gels for over 100 years longer than Teflon. So we do have pretty good data on it, and we've used it for everything from manufacturing microchips to porcelain dental crowns, which is to say it's fairly well understood at this point. PTFE, or polytetrafluoroethylene as the cool kids call it,
how do you do, fellow kids?
Has been around in some form since the 1940s under names like Teflon and DuPont Platinum. And the chemicals that we know to be harmful, like PFOA, were phased out back in 2015-ish. But there are many reasonable concerns that the replacements are not as non-toxic as we think they are. Perfect example. If you sear a steak in a modern PTFE pan in the same room as a pet bird, it has a really interesting tendency to die. And while the scientific consensus is that most humans are not in fact birds, it probably isn't perfectly safe for us. And therein lies the trade-off. These pans are convenient and inexpensive, but we should really use them as little as possible and exclusively at low heat. So what are they good for? Eggs, pancakes, some fish, soft tofu, things that would tear themselves apart in a stainless steel pan if they stuck. And that's it. That's the list. As a general rule, if it's not in the form of a skillet or a griddle, it really probably shouldn't be non-stick. So we're looking exclusively at 10-inch-ish skillets here. So unless you're making lots of candy, you definitely don't need a non-stick saucepan. And I can't think of a single reason why a non-stick stock pot is actually useful in any way. Those are just money grabs from large companies because it puts a lifespan on the cookware that you bought. So you have to replace it more often, which makes them more money. Most of these are effectively identical in performance, at least initially, but over the next 2 weeks, we're gonna take a deeper look at some of the standouts in the market, ranging in price from $30 all the way up to $220 from brands like Hexclad, OXO, Caraway, Tramontina, Hesta and Vollrath, and the new Our Place Always Pan 2.0. We're also gonna talk about how to take care of your pans, how to know when to retire them, and how to avoid using them at all if you can. See you tomorrow.